All right, the prosecutor remaining on the case of the Doomsday couple, Lori Vallow-Daybell and her husband, Chad. That ruling coming down late tonight. So that's important, because if you were going to bring a new prosecutor into this case, oh my goodness. I mean, how do you even get to the bottom of it? I mean, this prosecutor knows the case inside out, and it is one of the most complicated cases we've ever covered here at Court TV. So this hearing, feisty at times, accusations, and when you have one set of attorneys trying to get rid of another attorney on the case, it gets a little personal. Let's take a look back at everything that transpired leading up to that decision.
So, Mr. Pryor, are you ready to proceed with your closing argument?
I am, Your Honor, if I may.
Go ahead.
The question is whether or not an attorney and a prosecutor who's required to live by a higher set of rules has engaged in conduct that jeopardizes Mr. Daybell and Ms. Vallow's right to a fair trial. But what did Dr. Newton, the expert on case law, the expert on authority, what did he say that was compelling? He said he, meaning Mr. Wood, got caught. Now, getting caught is not the term you use unless either you're fishing or you're lying or you're cheating. And Mr. Woods is cheating, Mr. Wood is lying, and Mr. Wood is doing nothing but trying to influence, coach, intimidate a witness before that witness has had a chance to get in front of a trial. I cannot think of any situation that is more egregious than a prosecuting attorney who would go in and interview a witness and for 20 minutes not interview the witness, but rather offer a monologue of what his theory is in the case, disparage counsel, disparage the defendant, and manipulate.
I don't know if you know this, her attorney's never handled a felony before. He has never done any meaningful criminal work at all, and he doesn't know what he's doing. He's a nice guy. Yeah. Otherwise, lying about me, but he doesn't know what he's doing. Your sister can put on a brave face. Oh yeah. We were like, oh, does this guy know what he's gotten into? Mm-hmm. And because she was just very, very stoic, very like, I'm not going to say a word. And he looked like he was about to pee his pants because he's actually a wimpy person.
In summary, Your Honor, this. When you look at the recording and you read the transcript, I think the initial impression is red flags are raised, eyebrows are raised. When you listen to it again, I think it becomes quite a bit more disgusting when you hear the tone and the phrases and the speed of the language and the words used. There's just no way around that. There's just no way around that. He's telling this witness what he wants to hear. He's pouring his theory into this case of this witness. This is not a dead issue. There are other witnesses that have to be investigated now as a result of this.
The burden is upon the defense. They claim quite a bit of information of, well, we didn't call it as well. It's their burden. It's their burden throughout. The Idaho Supreme Court has said that very directly. So their burden is upon them to show any public suspension or suspicion. None has been offered in this case. Ms. Shiflett is not Mr. Daybell. She is not Ms. Vallow. She's a potential witness in the case. And there's no evidence to present that Mr. Wood directed her to say anything other than tell the truth. Our assertion is Mr. Wood did not violate those factors. And even if he came close with those factors, this court has the ability to structure a remedy, just like the defense's expert says. You don't need to disqualify Mr. Wood. There's a remedy for this. And the court's fully within its capable powers to be able to do that. Based on the law in the state of Idaho, based on the law in the Supreme Court of the United States, and what we have presented to you, there is not a way to disqualify the prosecutor, Mr. Wood, from this case. Thank you.
All right, so you think the trial's going to be boring? I mean, this is like pre-trial stuff, and they are going at it. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter, who's been on top of this story for a year and this issue since it was first raised. So give us some of the details of this and put a little perspective on it for us tonight.
Right. Well, this was a continuation today. More than 2 hours of arguments from the defense, from the prosecution were made this afternoon, a continuation of the hearing that we covered on Wednesday, the joint motion to disqualify Special Prosecutor Rob Wood. The defense on Wednesday calling 3 witnesses, the state not calling any witnesses. Well, today, after arguments and rebuttal, the judge took about an hour break, Vinny, to collect his thoughts, and then he issued a ruling, a rather long-winded ruling. He goes through a lot of the law because there is not any precedent in the state of Idaho for disqualifying a prosecutor pre-trial. So he outlines the law that, or the standards the defense wanted to use, the standards the prosecution presented. He said neither of those work in this situation. So he went outside of the state of Idaho and looked for persuasive precedent in the state of New York. So the standard that the judge used in making the decision today, he outlined as 2 parts. The first part is whether the pretrial activity, which would be the recording, the conversation with Summer Shiflett here, rendered the prosecutor Wood's participation in the trial unfair. And the second part was there a significant possibility that the pretrial activity, again, the conversation with Summer Shiflett, will be a material issue in the case? So the judge said, looking at this persuasive authority and then putting it to this case and the evidence before him in this hearing, he does not know whether or not Summer Shiflett will be a witness in the trial to come. So he's unable to determine the answer to that 2-part standard or that 2-part test. So therefore, he denied the defense's motion to disqualify Rob Wood. Rob Wood stays on the case. Like you said, he's been investigating this case from the very beginning, very involved in every matter. It would be tough to replace someone at this point in the trial. And so he stays on the case. The defense now will have to make decisions on what to do next. The judge did bring up an interesting point that those disparaging remarks that were in the conversation about Mark Means that Rob Wood told Summer Shiflett, saying that he's basically incompetent, the judge said that he was going to fall short of ordering Rob Wood to apologize for those disparaging comments, but that he would encourage civility moving forward between the attorneys in this case.
Yeah, I think he's a little off base with Mark Means, I'll be honest with you. I mean, from what I've seen, this is a guy who is pretty intense and very dedicated to the case. And the fact that the experience isn't deep, I'll go back in history a little bit, folks. I hate to remind you, I hate to remind myself, but there was another attorney who wasn't that experienced in a super high-profile case who walked his client out the door eventually. So I'm not going to say any names, don't need to. Late filings today?
There were some late filings, so we all are ready to watch this hearing this afternoon, and it was delayed for a little bit right off the bat because the state filed some motions this morning concerning Summer Shiflett, the person that Rob Wood was talking to, Lori's sister, during this recording. So we don't have these actual documents. Even though they were filed, they are not online or publicly available at this time, but you can see that they were filed. There was an affidavit from someone that our sources say is someone that works for the prosecutor's office, and some kind of conversation took place with this person in the prosecutor's office and Summer Shiflett. The prosecution filed a 13-page brief today saying that Summer Shiflett should be called as a witness, or the judge should consider these affidavits of what Summer Shiflett had to say about this matter. And so that sort of delayed the hearing at first today. The defense filed an objection also to these motions, saying that anything this person in the prosecutor's office had to say about the conversation with Summer Shiflett was hearsay. The judge sustained that objection. So then the prosecution wanted to actually call Summer Shiflett today to the stand, but the judge said no, the evidence was all in. The state had rested. The defense argued that that was just sort of a backdoor way to bring in more evidence now that the hearing was almost over. So we didn't hear from Summer Shiflett today, but let's listen to some of those arguments the defense made.
I've filed an objection to Summer Shiflett's affidavit being considered in this particular case. If Mr. Evans would like to cite the case and the case law and the statute that grants the court authority to hear Ms. Shiflett, by all means go ahead. But if he's going to regurgitate things that have happened that are clearly inadmissible, we're going to have a problem. And I'm going to strongly oppose this going down this path at this point. Quite honestly, Ms. Shiflett's testimony is really irrelevant to this. It's the conduct of Mr. Wood that's in question here, and I vehemently am opposed to allowing Ms. Shiflett to testify at this point.
Well, counsel, I've considered this motion in terms of where we are procedurally. Of course, we had a very lengthy hearing 2 days ago on the 6th. We took evidence and testimony during that hearing. We then concluded with the hearing and closed the submission of evidence. At this time, for purposes of the hearing today and our closing arguments, I am going to deny the motion to allow the testimony of Summer Shiflett.
John Pryor does not mince words, Vinny. He did that all throughout the day today. He told it like it was, in his opinion. And even though the state argued back that, look, Summer Shiflett is a critical witness, it's just for this trial because she can get up here and say whether or not Rob Wood tainted my testimony or influenced me in any way. But yet, the judge sustained the defense motion, and we did not hear from Summer Shiflett.
You know, it's interesting. Will we hear from her at the actual trial? And I'm guessing that prosecutors probably at this point don't want to call her because then it gets kind of messy, right? I wonder if the defense will call her just to make it messy at the trial, right? We call Summer Shiflett, and now all of a sudden it's an issue whether or not Rob Wood can question her or if he now becomes, it gets very messy very quickly. So these arguments that were made today, you know, if we break them down and try to figure out exactly what both sides were doing here, was it more about they really want him off the case? And what's the end game? If Rob Wood is off the case, doesn't that just delay everything?
It definitely delays everything, but now that he stays on the case, it might still delay everything because if you think about it, if the defense wants to, they can actually file to appeal this decision and halt the entire proceeding where it is. The case is already delayed because this hearing took the place of an important change of venue motion that was supposed to be heard this week. Instead, we're hearing the motion to disqualify Rob Wood. So replacing the prosecutor would delay, but we'll have to see how the defense is going to handle this decision today. Will they continue to try to fight it and appeal it before a higher court, or will they just move on and do what the judge suggested, which is act a little bit more civilly towards each other in the way they conduct themselves? But the crutch of the argument to me seemed to be around if it's not just Summer Shiflett, because that was caught, if I want to use John Pryor's words, caught on a recording. What other witnesses may have been affected, or what wasn't recorded that could have affected other witnesses? That to me seemed to be the most salient part of the defense's reason for bringing this motion.
Absolutely. And I think there's going to be an investigation by them to try to get to the bottom of what happened with those other witnesses. Chanley Painter, great report.